In an interview setting, interviewers have three big tools to evaluate your coding ability. First, they can assign you a take-home project, which is something that you would usually do on your own time, and then submit to the company looking to hire you. Second, your interviewer can sit down next to you at a computer, and the two of you can do a little bit of pair programming. Usually this pair programming focuses on a more practical use of skills, rather than algorithms or theoretical questions. Third, and what you will see most frequently at large companies like Google or Facebook, is whiteboarding. So the term whiteboarding is a reference to standing at a whiteboard or chalkboard and writing out some code to satisfy your interviewer's questions. Whiteboard interviews have traditionally been seen as kind of confrontational and certainly very nerve-wracking as well. Nonetheless, it really is the tool of preference for many large companies, and like we just mentioned in the last video, whiteboarding really is the easiest area for you to get better at. So the natural question to ask here is, how do we get better at whiteboard questions? If this is how we get hired, if doing well at whiteboard questions is how we get hired at a job, how do we get better at doing them? And the answer, that might be a little bit disappointing, is of course, practice, practice, practice. Non-stop practice. There's no magic pill that you can take. There's no secret one-time exercise that is going to turn you into a pro at whiteboard interview questions. All you can do is practice. Let me tell you a little bit about why practice is so important for interview questions by showing you two extremely common interview questions. So we're going to look at two very common questions and we're going to kind of break them down a little bit. And I think you're going to find this a little bit interesting. So the first one that we're going to look at is the classic fizz-buzz problem. If you've never seen it before, fizz-buzz is an extremely common interview question that requires you to print out all the numbers between 1 and 100. If a printed number is divisible by 3, you should print out the string fizz. And if the number is divisible by 5, then you should print out the string buzz. And then there's one other case on here as well, not super important. This is considered to be one of the easiest interview questions around, but people still fail this question all the time in interviews. So why is that? Is it that lots of people are just really bad at programming? Well, in my opinion, the reason that so many people fail at a supposedly easy question is that it's not really an easy question at all. My personal belief is that this is a moderately difficult one that has a little trick to it. But once you see that trick, once you know what that trick is, the problem becomes amazingly simple and amazingly straightforward. So I don't think that this is an inherently easy question. It's that as soon as you know the trick, it becomes incredibly simple. And that is repeated with so many interview questions. So many programming candidates who get interviewed are not sitting there in like a programming genius in an interview because they get every question right. It's because they have done enough questions on their own time, they've done enough practice to know the little trick that is required to solve each question. The more problems you practice and the more problems you solve, the better off you will be at knowing these little tricks as they come up. So let's see one other great example of this kind of phenomenon. So here's another amazingly common interview question. This is a question that I've been asked myself so many times in interviews, and I have seen it asked at companies that I've worked at as well. One company I worked at in particular asked every single candidate this question. So I've seen this question asked many times and I've seen it answered many times as well. So this is a question about the Fibonacci series. In this question, you're supposed to print out a specific number from the Fibonacci series. Now, it's not really important to understand what the Fibonacci series is just yet. I kind of want to have just a little bit more commentary about what's going on around this question. In most interviews, an interviewer will ask the candidate to solve this problem with a recursive solution. So here's the recursive solution down here. Now, I'm going to level with you. Okay? I'm going to be really honest here. I have seen amazingly few candidates over the years who have sat down and come up with this recursive solution on the fly. Like, in other words, nobody is really being asked this question for the first time in an interview and giving this as a solution. I'm 100% convinced of that. Instead, every last one of these candidates who ever get this question right has always practiced this exact question in the past. They memorize this very short solution right here, and then, hey, as soon as you get asked this question, great, here's this like 3-line solution right here. So the more you practice these problems, the more likely it is that you'll be asked a problem that you have already seen. Of course, if you have been in an interview and came up with a solution on the fly, if that has happened to you in the past, that's great. I'm not saying that it's impossible and doesn't happen for people to figure this out on the fly. I'm just saying that in the bulk of my experience, most people who solve this question have seen it before. And most people who have not seen it usually fail the question, which is certainly not good. Okay, so hopefully at this point, it's clear why solving problems nonstop really is the best way to get better at technical interviews. So let's continue in the next video where we're going to start to discuss how problems in this course are laid out. So quick break, and I'll see you in just a minute.